Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're going to talk about something fascinating, the science of what's happening in our brains when we mess up, and why, believe it or not, it might actually be the best thing for us.
You know that feeling, right? That pit in your stomach when you get a test back and it's just covered in red ink? Yeah. From the time we're little kids, that's like the universal sign for you failed. Something you're supposed to avoid, at all costs.
Okay, but what if that whole instinct is just wrong? In this explainer, we're going to dig into some pretty cool science that completely flips that idea on its head. It turns out that making mistakes might just be the most powerful learning tool you've got. All right, so first up, let's talk about where this fear of failure even comes from. We got to look at the traditional way we're taught, a system you could almost call the cult of correctness.
Think about it. In this kind of classroom, it's all about getting the right answer. The goal is a perfect score, right? Flawless performance. And that really puts the focus on memorizing the outcome, instead of focusing on the messy, kind of complicated, but way more valuable process of actually learning.
So what's actually going on inside our brains when we're taught this way? Well, this is where the neuroscience gets really fascinating. We're going to see how this whole focus on being correct literally shapes the physical structure of our brains.
Okay, so check this out. There was this groundbreaking study from USC that put two groups of students head-to-head. On one side, you have kids from traditional schools, the ones that are all about getting the right answer. And on the other, you have kids from Montessori schools, where mistakes are treated more like clues, like valuable information you can learn from.
So they had these students solve math problems while they were inside an fMRI machine, which basically tracks brain activity. The researchers were hunting for a specific signal, something they call error monitoring. It's just the brain's way of noticing, oops, I messed up, and then trying to fix it. And what they found? It was pretty startling.
Okay, get this. The results were just wow. For the Montessori students, their brains lit up with activity after they made a mistake. You could practically see them thinking, okay, what went wrong here? But the students from traditional schools, their brains only got that engaged when they got an answer right. It's like they shut down after a mistake. The study's leader, Mary Helen Immordino-Yang, summed it up perfectly. She said we're potentially teaching kids to curtail their natural curiosity to try to memorize correct answers, but not to try to use information from the world to figure stuff out.
All right, so the science is pretty clear. Our brains are literally built to learn from mistakes. So the big question is, how do we create the right conditions to actually let that happen? Well, it really boils down to two key things. What's going on around us, our environment, and what's going on inside us, our mindset.
Let's start with the outside stuff. The first ingredient is something called psychological safety. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's that feeling you get when you know it's okay to take a risk. You can ask what feels like a dumb question. You can try something and fail, and you know you're not going to be embarrassed or punished for it. And this idea of safety isn't just an on or off switch. It's more like a journey with a few stages. You start with just feeling like you belong. But the really crucial step, stage 2, is what they call learner safety. That's the magic moment. That's when you feel free enough to ask questions, to mess around, to experiment, and to make mistakes without worrying. And only when you have that do you feel safe enough to really start contributing, and eventually even challenging how things are done. Okay, so that's the external piece. Now for the internal one. Researchers have a great name for this: academic tenacity. It's basically just a fancy way of saying grit. It's that inner resilience that helps you push through when things get really tough.
So you can see how this is the other side of the coin to psychological safety, right? And this tenacity, it's not about being smart, not at all. It's all about having what we call a growth mindset. It's believing that your effort is what leads to success, not just some talent you were born with. And when you believe that, every single setback becomes an opportunity to learn and get better. So if we need this tenacity, how do we actually build it? Well, there's a fascinating teaching method that basically weaponizes this whole idea of learning from mistakes. It's called productive failure. I know, it sounds like a total contradiction, right? But believe me, it is incredibly effective.
Okay, so here's the deal with productive failure. Imagine you're given a really tough new problem to solve before anyone has taught you how to do it. The idea is that the struggle itself, even if you totally fail to find the answer, is super important. That struggle kind of wakes up your brain, activates everything you already know, and gets you perfectly primed for the real lesson that's about to come. You can see how this is the complete opposite of how things are usually done, right? In what's called direct instruction, the teacher explains a concept, and then you go practice it. With productive failure, it's flipped. You wrestle with the problem first.
Let me give you a great example from a key study. Students were handed this data on soccer players and told, okay, come up with a formula to figure out who the most consistent player is. Now, the trick was they weren't actually expected to get the right formula. The whole point was just to get them to really think deeply about what consistency even means.
And the results were just profound. So take a look at this chart. That first bar, procedural fluency, shows that both groups got equally good at just crunching the numbers. No difference there. But then, look at the next two bars. The productive failure group, the ones who struggled first, had a way deeper conceptual understanding. They didn't just know how to do the math, they knew why it worked. And they were way better at transfer, which means taking that knowledge and applying it to totally new problems. So see, they didn't just memorize a procedure, they actually understood the idea.
Okay, so this is all great in theory, but how can you and I actually apply these super powerful principles to our own lives? Let's talk about some real, practical tools you can use to make your mistakes work for you.
First, let's rethink what feedback even is. You know, truly useful feedback isn't just getting a grade or someone saying good job. It's really more of a conversation. It's about answering 3 core questions that give you a roadmap for how to get better, instead of just a judgment on how you did.
And a fantastic tool for having this conversation with yourself is something called an exam wrapper. The idea is simple. Instead of just looking at your score on a test and then stuffing it in your bag, you take a moment for a structured reflection on how you actually did. Basically, it forces you to be a detective for your own learning process. You ask yourself specific questions like, okay, how many points did I lose because of just a careless mistake? Or, how many did I lose because I really didn't get the concept? By doing this kind of analysis, you're turning that test from the past into a super personalized study guide for your future.
So when you put it all together, what we're really talking about is a totally new definition of success. It's not about that perfect test paper with no red ink on it. Real success, it's about having the courage to even try something hard, the resilience to struggle when you hit a wall, and the wisdom you pick up from that whole messy process.
And look, this idea of reframing mistakes, it's so much bigger than just school. It is a fundamental mindset for growth in pretty much every single part of your life. So this final question here isn't just a nice thought to end on, it's a real challenge. What failure are you going to learn from today?